Welcome back to Forest Hill United Methodist Church's podcast, It Takes a Village. Today we are with Danielle Pennington, and she has created the Garden of Synergy, which is a nonprofit, and she is here to tell us a little bit about this. We met her through the market at Gibson Village, and she has brought lots of knowledge to us and some great recipes. We've tasted some of her plant-based cooking she's brought down to the market, and we're just delighted that you're here with us today. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Absolutely. So first of all, peace and gratitude for this space. Thank y'all so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure to be in community with you all. Again, my name is Danielle Pennington. I am the founder and director of the Garden of Synergy. As we mentioned, it's a grassroots nonprofit initiative founded in 2022 that uplifts the collective through sustainable agriculture, wellness education, and integrative therapies, creative therapies. Myself, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a wellness practitioner and a environmental justice advocate. I think I would do myself amiss to not mention that I'm a community builder as well. I'm born and raised in Albemarle, North Carolina, so I'm a country girl. But my journey has always been guided by a deep love for people, culture, the food, and the land that connects us. I would say my background is in hospitality and public health, community education as well. And I would say I've spent the last decade working at the intersection of something like nutrition, healing, and empowerment, especially with the youth and marginalized communities as well. I would say environmental advocacy is very personal to me. Like I said, I'm from Albemarle, North Carolina, and I've long spoken out against the toxic legacy left behind by the Alcoa company in my hometown. So for those of you who don't know, Alcoa's legacy includes disposing of hazardous waste, particularly spent pot liner, for decades without adequate regulation. So this has transcended, I should say, the materials that Alcoa was dumping in my hometown are to include like asbestos, fluoride, black coal tar, things that we all know is very harmful for human consumption. Like fish advisories have been put on our lakes. You can only eat like one fish a year. That's how contaminated our water supply is. So this is kind of the life this is the gumbo, I should say, that I was birthed into. So it was very natural for me to not only support these marginalized communities. These communities were heavily populated with African-American people, also of Hispanic populations as well. So I would say, as an innate healer, as a born healer, trying to not only heal the land and the people that tend to it, but it also took me back to the foundation of health, which for me is nutrition. So as a youngster, by the time I would say I was in, I think, 6th grade, we had a class called career class. I don't know if this is a thing. Yeah, it's a thing.
Was for me.
Right? I talk about this to students now, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, they let you just go to work with I'm like, yeah, it was a thing. But I kid you not, I shadowed, is what we called it, an orthopedic surgeon in Albemarle, Dr. Ladd Jones. I'll never forget you. You're the man, by the way. And I literally was waking up at 4 a.m., scrubbing in, going in and helping, like actively helping with surgeries.
I didn't do that. We just explored careers.
Yeah, no, this is
we didn't have that opportunity.
Oh my goodness. And I loved it. At the end of my, I would say 3 years shadowing him, he basically warned me. And he told me, he basically could see my heart. He was like, I see you. And he wanted me to reconsider. I was, going to med school. Nothing was stopping me, right? I was very determined. And he was just warning me into the policies and the governance around our industrialized system that we've now come to know. So my stubborn and hard-headed self still went to UNC Chapel Hill, where I was a undergrad pre-med student. It wasn't until my 3rd year in my medical studies that I finally understood what Dr. Ladd Jones was trying to tell me, right? I became increasingly disillusioned by the healthcare industry's conflicts of interest, where more often than not, profit takes precedence over patient care. I coined the nickname The Cure for wanting to cure people with preventative medicine, as opposed to band-aiding them with prescriptions and therapies, right? So pivoting with purpose, I changed my major to exercise and sports science, which is what I landed with, and Hispanic studies. And I then journeyed a deep exploration into holistic medicine and the healing arts as a tool for not only personal growth, but communal and systemic transformation. Yes, ma'am.
Wow. So that's awesome. So tell us, like, I think I can begin to see how that's forming into the Garden of Synergy and
Absolutely.
kind of how that came to be. But tell us a little bit about what happened for you to form Garden of Synergy.
Sure. So I would say I was really, Lord, give me the words. I was really called. I was honestly called for the job. God gave me the blueprint about a decade ago. Don't tell nobody. I'm working on it. But glory to God for shining light on what it means for me to step into my purpose, like authentically. After years of kind of witnessing the disconnect between health resources and the communities, definitely the communities that need them most too. I realized we needed more spaces where people could learn, express, and grow even and heal without shame or judgment or inequities. So I naturally was welcomed and inspired by the hospitality industry. So this kind of component gave me, or this experience gave me what I needed in terms of community outreach and engagement and understanding culture from very different perspectives. But there was always this foundation of health and nutrition and wellness. I just couldn't find my path. I couldn't find my niche. So I became an integrated health coach shortly after I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, where I designated a lot of my time with the city of Albemarle Parks and Recreation Department. So there I was leading community events surrounding health and wellness. Some of my particular favorite groups was like the Silver Foxes. They are a group of probably like 15, ranging from like 60 years old to like 90 years old. The most determined and happy people you ever meet in your life to be up like every day at 8 a.m. But it was engaging with them and truly kind of merging what I would consider myself as modern knowledge with their ancestral knowledge. It was the most kind of inspiring times of my life, was really seeing where we need each other in that light of the village or the community. And I saw where their insights into health and wellness, not only are they culturally affirmed or they innate into who they are as a being, but I also saw how challenging it was to actually execute behavior change. So these are people, my students, that for 60 years have been consuming, let's say, unhealthy means, right? So I really learned how to, almost that bedside manner, but dealing with real people that's not necessarily bedridden, not necessarily, they're surviving, but how do I take this survival mentality and create a thriving mentality, even in those who are later in life? I would then say I pivoted again into my role with Cooperative Extension, where I was a food and nutrition educator with NC State. And that really gave me the vision for how I was to move forward. So not only was I engaging with strategic partners within the local food system, I was teaching at a crazy rate. I was teaching the youth populations here in Cabarrus County, as well as adult populations, and really figuring out how to tweak my programming for each age group. And then also, the youth coming up now is not the youth how we came up. So they were also keeping me in the inn for how to connect with the younger generations. But also, it was even heavier on me dealing with the youth populations in real time, because you get a better, a grave understanding for how disconnected the people are to the food, to the community, right? I'm asking kids, in youth programming, for instance, with the Boys and Girls Club, I always like to kind of poke fun of them, ask them, what'd you eat for dinner? And they're like, Takis. I'm like, what's a Taki? The chips are like Doritos. I'm like, no, babe, like, what'd you have for dinner? And they're like, no, I had a bag of Takis. Like, I'm like, the little bite-sized bag? They're like, no, like the big bag. And so it goes to show me, I think it's at a pace in which we move as consumers in this hustle culture that we've come to know as Americans. It really gave me this platform of this like anti-hustle culture that's like, take a look at yourself and observe in a very real kind of way with no judgment, and highlight the areas in your life that you want to improve. So that's really where I started with my integrative health coaching, was inspiring on a personal level. Once I started inspiring on a personal level, I saw how my students were able to then inspire as they reach to others. So people constantly ask my students, like, what are you doing?
Like circles of influence.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's a ripple effect. So the circles just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I saw, wow, I can see how I don't have to directly impact every person. But if I can directly impact one who's going to reach and teach another, that's massive. So then came, the idea of the Garden of Synergy. And with intention, I wanted to not only harness the power of nature through like clean energy and even community composting, right, where we're reducing the greenhouse gas emissions just through community composting, which, I mean, in my local neighborhood, we just have buckets. I deliver a bucket to the house. They dump their scraps and they drop it off on the weekends. Generally, they'll come and dump it and add it to ours. And we've got thousands of pounds of compost at this point. It's just like, wow, that was just a thought of mine. Like, how can we, instead of, we spoke on lab-grown meat, synthetic meat earlier, instead of trying to rewrite what kind of meat we eat and how we eat this meat without any, substantial, let's say, evidence as to how beneficial it is for us, why can't we start cutting out, the CO2 gas emissions through community composting and things like this?
That's
and those really took off.
Idea. We'll have to have another conversation about community composting.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. But I would say, the Garden of Synergy's intention is to really reconnect with these land-based traditions, which I see through our ancestors, whether they're still here with us or not, right? But how do we reconnect with those land-based traditions that have served us for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And how do we restore those luscious, deep roots of the village?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about community and community around the table, and like not just understanding that food is so many things. So food is hospitality, food is comfort, food is also community building and how we do that together. It is also, we have food justice issues, which you talked a lot about, which coincide with environmental concerns and just a lot of intersections. And we have really tried to be intentional about thinking about how we consume food and how that intersects with God's good creation and all of that. So we've been thinking kind of comprehensively, just more than the food that we put in our body. It should be nutritious, which is very true. But where does it come from? How far does it travel? Those kinds of things. And that really dovetails well into the market, because we have worked hard to bring in local people to do things, and local produce and things like that.
That's right.
So anyway, that's how we kind of came to you,
and
now we're trying to figure out how to build on that. And one of the things that we're kind of talking about is having a class where you can teach us about how to integrate food plants into our diet even more, and some cooking tips. So just going to throw out a plug that on August the 20th, we just scheduled this, August the 20th at 6 p.m. At Gibson Village. We're going to do a class and kind of think through that. So that's a Wednesday night, and you'll be coming to talk a little bit about that. And so we're still kind of refining where we end up with that. But do you want to say anything about
that? Just going off of what you just said, it tapped me back into speaking on like what food is. And I think as I was maturing into my becoming, health for me, was very much what you do, right? And I'm speaking on like physically and actively, like you needed to be working out to be in good shape or those types of things. But let me ask you this. So do y'all know the number one leading cause of death? It's definitely in Cabarrus County. I've done extensive research, but in the U.S. in general, what's the number one cause of death?
I don't know. I would say heart disease.
Boom, you nailed it. Heart disease, cancer, right? Now, some of these are genetic. Some of these are predisposed. So I'm not linking everybody in here that's got heart disease. you're not always what you eat, right? You are what you eat. You're not always what you eat. Sometimes you're medically predisposed to these things. Generally speaking, for the overwhelming majority of us, heart disease and cancer are our number one leading causes of death in the U.S., especially here in Cabarrus County. So what does that tell me? Our number one leading cause of death in our nation is preventable. Largely preventable. There are some exceptions there, right? So not only that, but if it's preventable, what's the number one determinant of your overall health?
I'd say education.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say you're hand in hand. So no. It's nutrition. It's basically what you consume.
I was thinking like the education about
behind
knowing
it.
What to do.
Absolutely.
What to eat
Absolutely. So it's nutrition
and access,
education.
Right. That's also another piece
right.
of that.
100%. And most people will say like knowledge is power, right? But knowledge isn't power unless you actually apply that knowledge, right? So I think it's that application of that information, application of nutrition education that's really going to propel us from our nation that's in a state of disease. But again, I wanted to kind of piggyback off what you just said, like what is food? And food is so much more than calories or nutrients, right? It's culture. When you start messing with people's diet, they can get really flustered about it because it's innately who they are and how they've been raised. I often remember, especially, country girl, coming up under my grandma's wing, right? She'd make homemade biscuits, like smothered in sausage gravy, you know what I'm saying? And now it was in moderation, we might have had this once every, week or so like this. But it's those, if I have biscuits and gravy right now, it takes me back to my grandma, so it's those connections that we have with food. And I say that it's memory, your sense of smell has the longest timestamp on it. So you can smell something and it'll just take you back to that place, right? Or that time or that feeling. I literally just got chills thinking about my grandmother. And food is also medicine. I live and breathe by that. Let thy food be thy medicine, right? So I would say at the Garden of Synergy, we approach food, we see food as a sacred connector, quite literally, between body and soul, between generations, between community and the land. It is most definitely the bridge or the connector that's going to unite us and also take us to kind of our optimal selves, right? Speaking on the class in general, I would say it's about an hour long. I don't, usually about 10 minutes is the educational proportion. I'll hit you with some of the highlights and the nutritional facts and just the education that allowed me to detox my diet. I am not one to kind of preach and not practice. So I would say about 5 years ago, I really took a journey down kind of, my diet journey. And I was able to successfully rid processed sugar. Don't get me wrong, my baby's birthday was on Monday, so we did have cupcakes. It's all about moderation. It's all about proportion. And I should say too, like food is celebratory, right? It's communion. God very much intended us, he gave us all the trees with all the fruits and all the plants, right? And he wants us to enjoy it, but also expressing gratitude for it in a very loving and appreciative way. So I love to share my journey, how I was able to rid processed sugar, caffeine, and I also minimized my meat consumption by about half. So not only is this just being mindful, I come from a family this heart diseased, bless it, on both sides, maternal and paternal. So I had that knowledge to say, oh, I'm probably one of those that's predisposed to this if I don't check myself. Not only that, I'm a mother of 5 kids. So if I don't start practicing what I preach, I'm also going to hand down this tradition of unhealthy eating to my kids. Y'all should have seen it when I took out, so no sugar, right? No processed sugar. It's very important there, processed sugar. Sugar is not bad. Like fruit is sugar, right? Y'all should have seen it when I took out the cereal. I'm talking the Lucky Charms, the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I literally threw it away. I was like, no more. My kids were like, oh no, just about to die. But now they understand it. So now, for instance, my daughter, I told you it was her birthday this past week. She goes and stays with my grandma. So my grandma's just like, birthday celebration. So we're eating, fast food. we're eating Pop-Tarts and sugary cereal. My baby had a headache for 3 days. Her belly was hurting for 2 days. And once you remove these toxins from our bodies will re-regulate themselves. Now, if my kids enjoy watermelon or cantaloupe, they say, oh my God, it's so sweet, because they've now balanced that. You're almost a tolerance for sugar. If you're loading your, even sodium as well, same thing holds true. So once you minimize your sodium intake, once you minimize your sugar intake, naturally salty foods or naturally sugary foods become very well presented in your taste buds, in your profile. So I love to share that, particularly on the first day, just to get to know me and to kind of synergize with the participants. I love to share my story. It also allows me to resonate with the population. More often than not, especially as a wellness practitioner, I come from the lens of, oh, well, she grew up that way. She knew healthy eating. It wasn't something, but it wasn't. These were habits that I not only had to let go of, but I had to reintroduce those healthy habits. And so I love to share kind of my journey as a way to not only resonate with the participants, but also share with them my blueprint. Like, I'm not ashamed of being a sugar consumer. I'm not ashamed of eating way too much dairy and meat. I didn't know any better. But when I knew better, it was time to start applying these principles. And then not only start applying these principles, but people around me were like, oh, your face is clear. You're glowing. Oh, wow. It looks like, I lost a little bit of weight. I didn't necessarily lose weight. My body just regulates the fat storage differently, right? So as opposed to having like belly fat, which is, generally overconsumption of sugar in the forms of like unhealthy carbs, right? So instead of having belly fat, I was getting fat where women are supposed to have fat, right? So it was just a redistribution, I would say, of that. People were noticing. And they're like, oh, are you dieting? Well, diet is just what you eat. Diet isn't necessarily restricting a food. Your diet is just what you consume on a regular basis.
So we should just do a good job at consuming good things.
That's exactly right. It's very much, I call it a mindful practice, mindful eating.
We've talked a lot about that.
Oh,
of course you have. We've talked a lot about mindful and gratitude and all of those things.
Right.
So I don't want you to tell us everything, because we still want to come to class. So we're looking forward to that. It's been so much fun to have you here with us. We're really glad that you're here. And can't wait to see all the ways that you continue to enrich life at Bar Hill. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we will see you on our next episode of It Takes a Village.